About me, what I do is I write narrative nonfiction. So basically what I do is I try and write something that maybe you haven't heard, like Titanic, or some story that is maybe something that's in your consciousness, but maybe there's an angle to it you haven't heard. And that's what I do. I sort of find the thing you haven't heard. I wrote a book called Madam President, The Secret Presidency of Edith Wilson, who ran the country from 1919 to 1921. And she was the first woman president. So with that, let's jump into our story here. It's called Greed in the Gilded Age, The Brilliant Con of Cassie Chadwick. And this is Mark Twain. I'm sure you all know that. And the Gilded Age, what does that mean? Well, Twain came up with that to describe this age where basically, think of piece of rotten wood with a gold patina over it. And that's how Twain saw it. It was this era of incredible change in the United States. After the Civil War, they had laid in all these railroads to move troops around. Well, now they could create a national market. And the national market would allow people to sell their goods, not just in their town, but in New York. So what did this do? Well, this created conglomerates. And so suddenly you weren't just raising your corn and selling them locally. You were selling them to somebody you couldn't see. Also, we were moving from a nation of farms to a nation of cities. And so what did this do? Well, this made us start to actually sell our labor. And this was a new concept where actually you were putting a price tag on your labor. So if you went to work in a foundry or factory or something, you were paid by the hour. And so, sort of wage slaves kind of came into being in terms of a term. But this was a very different market. So this created immense amounts of wealth. And this wealth centered at a time when wealth was untaxed in the hands of a few, the robber barons, as they were called during the Gilded Age. And this kind of money, nobody had seen this kind of money before. So this was an era of rapid change. America was moving from a rural to this urban-based society. And again, it was creating these mega wealthy men. And one of them was this guy, Andrew Carnegie, short Santa Claus. He was only about 5 foot. I mean, he looks like a Lilliputian. I mean, he was from Scotland. He came over with nothing. He started as a telegraph operator, moved up, and he created U.S. Steel. And so he basically made his money off of selling steel and tracks to the railroads, to the rails. And Carnegie was, an interesting man. He didn't work a heck of a lot, and he'll be the first one to say that. And we'll talk about that some more. But he was, after he sold to J.P. Morgan, U.S. Steel, he became the richest man in America. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is this woman. In my book, her name is Cassie Chadwick. Her real name is Elizabeth Bigley. She and Carnegie will have the strangest intersection in history. She's basically a drifter from Canada. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but they will meet in the trial of the century. This trial was so popular and such a media magnet that it pushed the inauguration of Teddy Roosevelt off the front page. When I wrote this book from thousands of newspaper articles, because there's not really a book on her. I mean, there's another gentleman who just came out with a book on her, but it's part of a crime series. And there was really nothing else. So I just had to go get her story from all these newspaper articles. Fortunately, she was very, very covered. Let's talk about her in the beginning, and we'll move along. She was born in Canada. Real name.
Yeah, you're breaking up. You're breaking up a bit.
I'm breaking up some. All right, let's see.
Yeah, I'm getting a low bandwidth notice on your. Says your bandwidth is low. I don't know.
Okay, let me look at something here. I'm just gonna, I might lose something here, but I'm gonna try something. Let me see if we have something
We have-
going. Okay, let me see what router it's on.
Okay,
All right. Let's get this right. Okay, I can try. Let me try. That's strange. How's that?
nope,
No. All right.
nope.
Hold on one second. Let me.
It's odd because you were fine before. I don't
Yeah,
understand.
it could just be. It could change. I'm gonna go back. Hold on. Okay. I'm gonna
All
go
right.
back to the original. Okay. Let me go back. No.
Someone just put in chat. I think the universe is telling us to just go by the book.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. How about now? Is it better?
That seems better. Let's try that and see how we go.
Okay. All right. Let me get back into it here. Let's see. Get out of that. Okay. I can see me and see if I can put that back down. That's not gonna be that easy. Hang on a second, folks. Just give me 1 second here so I can get back to that.
They have the Elizabeth Bigley picture up on screen.
Yeah,
The
I know.
tracks. Okay.
And it's just hold on 1 second. All right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right. It's all gone, right? Okay.
Yes, it's gone.
Okay. I'm gonna reopen it because it's a panelist. I can't get into it any other way. So let's see here. Talk on yourselves. It's coming.
Yourself. See, here we were just extolling the virtues of Zoom and see what
right.
happened, right?
Yeah. It's been a long time since it's done this. So. Okay. It's firing up.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. But yeah, I mean, since you did mention that, yeah, you should all go by the book. Yeah.
See?
Someone asked about your background. The background is actually a picture of the Titanic.
Oh yeah, that is. That's actually it being built right there. in Belfast. And so it's taking forever to open.
That's okay. If we run a few minutes over, we're okay
We're
because
okay.
nobody's anywhere.
Okay.
All right.
Sure.
While you're pulling that up, I'm just gonna tell them
Yeah,
if I
backfill.
get back to that, what some of your other books are. And I would check now we have a lot of these at Eisenhower. I know we do. I can't tell you for sure exactly which ones we all have because I can't pull everything up on my phone at once, but the 160 minutes on the Titanic, we definitely do have. He has one on, he mentioned Madam President, the Secret Presidency of Edith Wilson. I believe we have that one as well. Al Capone in the 1933 World's Fair. I do know that we have that one, if you're interested in that. Sally Rand, which we had as a program, wow, early in the pandemic, I believe we had it. American Sex Symbol, we have that one as well. We have the Wright Brothers Wrong Story about, obviously, the Wright brothers. I don't know if we have there's one on Teddy Roosevelt. He has a new one that's going to be coming out next year called Writing Gatsby about F. Scott Fitzgerald. So you might be interested in that. And we would be more than happy to put any of these on hold for you if they are not available when you come in, or hopefully they may be on the shelf. If you did miss the Titanic one, that was a great program. And he was just saying that they're going to be doing that again in April at a lot of places because it's the 110th anniversary. So if it's not at Eisenhower, but you might check his webpage and find out where else he's going to be. And you can pick up that Titanic one, which was absolutely fascinating if you have not seen that.
Okay. Can you guys see that?
We can see you
Okay. We gotta share it.
share, yeah.
Okay. You can't share it. I've got to share it, right? Okay. Hang on.
I think it's,
I think I can do it.
okay. Yeah, I think you have to do it.
Yeah.
And the books, yeah, those books are all true.
Yeah, everything's true. It's all narrative nonfiction. All right, so can you see that?
Yes.
All right. Bang, 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 bang. Bang. There we are. Okay.
Hey,
All right, let's try it again.
okay, let's see what happens.
Take two. Okay. So Elizabeth Bigley, she was actually born by a railroad, and her father worked for the railroad, so they're very poor. But early on, she was very different. Her family would comment the way she'd go on these strange spells, wouldn't talk to anybody, almost sort of would go into another world. She had a very sort of interior life, but she wanted better. She wanted the bright, shiny things in life. And so what she did was she took some of her mother's makeup, took her an old hat of hers, made her own dress, and then she went to the town nearby and she made herself a little card. And this is when she's in her 20s. and this is the card. She said, you know, I'm an heiress. I'm going to inherit $15,000. Now, but the way banks lent then was they lent on perceived wealth. Today we have all these loan documents and all this background check. They didn't have any of that. Basically, people would make a decision and they'd say, you know, this is a good risk. And a lot of times it was off the person coming in. So she came in with this card and she looked wealthy. She had, you know, kind of put this ensemble together, although her shoes had holes in them, but nobody could see that. And she had a lisp, and she had a very beguiling figure already. She had these small sort of white animal teeth, and she had hypnotic eyes. And a lot of men would comment on this. And so she went in and she went from teller to teller, and she ended up basically in front of the bank president. And he agreed to give her a loan. In fact, what he did was he gave her checks. And so she went all over town and, you know, wrote checks everywhere. She had a strange understanding of money at a very early age. And she would write checks over the amount and get cash. So she ended up staying in a hotel, smoking a cigarette. When they finally caught up with her, because all these checks were all over town, she got hauled into court and she pled insanity. She basically tore her clothes all to pieces, you know, yell and stuff. And so they thought she was crazy. And so the court said, you know, if she leaves basically the area, they'll let her off. And so what her parents did is they sent her to stay with her sister in America, Alice, who had married and, you know, settled down in Cleveland. So that's what they did. Elizabeth Bigley went to America. Now she was very taken with America. She read about it. She thought that it was sort of Oz. You know, this was all this money. You know, people were getting rich overnight, and this really appealed to her. So she immediately started to think of ways to get money. And while she was staying with her sister, she would, you know, make dresses for people, things like that. But then she created a persona, a Miss Bastato. And Miss Bastato, again, was a woman who was standing to inherit millions. And she went off and started pulling loans again in Cleveland while living in her sister's house. Well, she was basically dealing with a lot of loan sharks. And so they started to demand security. So what did she do? She mortgaged her sister's furniture. And, you know, kept getting money, kept going to expensive restaurants, buying clothes, just doing all these opulent things. Finally, the creditors all showed up at her sister's house, and her husband was there. And when her sister came home, her husband basically said, "Do you know what your sister's been doing? She's hocked our furniture all over town." And so when Elizabeth came home, they threw her out. They threw her right out of the house. Now, she opens up a dress shop, but then she carries on this persona of this Miss Bastato, and actually ensnares a man named Dr. Springsteen, who was a fairly prominent doctor. But again, she spends and spends and spends, even before they're married, using his name, and just racking up all this debt. And then on their wedding night, men show up at their house demanding payment. And Dr. Springsteen says, "Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about." And he hires a detective, and Elizabeth says, this is crazy. They're mistaken. But he hires a detective, and he finds out about her previous crimes, and the fact that she's from Canada, and because she had told her that she was a rich heiress from Ireland. And he throws her out, divorces her. But, you know, she's not done then. She goes traveling around and ends up, you know, using his name to stay in hotels, and basically wants to borrow $6,000 on his name. And they catch up with him and say, "This woman says she's your wife." And he says, "Absolutely not. Don't give her a nickel." So Cassie is at a very early point in her life, is willing to just do what nobody else will do to get money. And it's almost incredible that she can pull this off. But she understands greed. She has a strange understanding of banking. of the way money is transferred, the way money is lent, and she understands what these men are looking for. Now, she does another incredible transformation after getting thrown out with Dr. Springsteen. This is a time in the early 20th century where spiritualism was a big thing. A lot of people were questioning everything. Well, America was very, very religious in the 19th century. Suddenly, we're in this age of mechanization, industrialization, science. So the secular world's moving in, and people are fascinated with trying to talk to the dead. So you could basically set up a shop and say you're a spiritualist and charge people, and that's basically what she did. She became Madame Bovary, and she would, tell people that they could talk to the dead with her, and so she did this for a while, pulling this off. There's also were sort of untoward rumors that she was selling other things other than just talking to the dead, namely her body. These are sort of unsubstantiated, but she was a wheeler dealer. Now she meets another man named C.L. Hoover, who is a farmer, and we don't know a lot about him, just that he had some money. And C.L. Hoover, she has a son with him, and he dies, leaving her some money. We aren't sure how much, maybe 20,000, 25,000. But she makes peace with her sister because really she has nowhere to go, and goes back home into Cleveland again. Now she quickly runs out of money once again, and she decides to, why not do the Madame Bovary thing again and be a spiritualist and try and make some money again. So she does. And this goes well for a while. Again, now there is definitely rumblings of other things going on in her little seance parlor. And there's a guy named Lamb. Mr. Lamb comes in, and he's sort of a flim-flam artist himself. And he asked her to assist him in getting some money and asked her to forge some documents for him. She does it. It blows up. She gets pulled into court, and basically Joseph Lamb throws her under the bus, and she ends up going to prison, sentenced for 9.5 years. Now, this is an actual photo. And really, it's a strange episode in her life where it seems like, she to this point has been the con person, but then she got conned, and so somebody played her. And this is the actual at this time, this is sort of record they would keep. And what's interesting about this is if you look on the left, it says Bertillon measurements. Now, the Bertillon system was a way for measuring insanity and was based on measurements of your head. And so they thought she was insane, and so they measured her head and all this stuff. Well, she worked in the dress shop there in the in prison, and she got out early. She only served a couple years. But one thing that happened to her while she was there was she started to plot her revenge, and she vowed to never let men do this to her again. And that's who she blamed for being imprisoned. And so she's going to get out with just this, not reformed, but this sort of burning desire to get back, to get revenge. Now, let's catch up with Mr. Carnegie. Mr. Carnegie made ungodly amounts of money, and he didn't understand why. So he took a few years off, and he wrote a book called The Gospel of Wealth. And basically in it, he tried to figure out why he would get so much money when others had nothing. And all he could come down to was that he had been at the right place at the right time, and that God ordained certain people to have money. And he came with a sort of Darwinian philosophy of if you got this money, then it was up to you to hand it off to other people at a certain point in your life. And he would do that later in his life. But for our purposes, what he saw wealth is accidental. And it wasn't in his mind because of hard work, because he only worked like 4 hours a day. He believed it was where you ended up situationally. So Carnegie is starting to move into more of a philanthropy part of his life at this point. Now, we get to the era of Dr. Chadwick. Now, Dr. Chadwick was a renowned physician in Cincinnati who lived on Millionaire's Row. Cassie gets out of jail. She returns. She becomes, again, Madame de Vry. She picks up on that. It's a way to make money, and, you know, other things. And Dr. Chadwick actually has rheumatoid arthritis. She also was running sort of a massage parlor. And so he comes in there for some massage. And he's taken with this woman who, you know, she's gained weight back from prison, her colors come back. And again, she's an attractive woman. And he has a daughter and a mother at home. His wife had died. So he's really looking for somebody to run the house. And this is his house there. It's a big house on Millionaire's Row. So he visits her, and they start to court. And again, she uses the old "I'm an heiress from Ireland." He buys off on it. And Dr. Chadwick has a good amount of money, and they marry. And suddenly, Cassie Chadwick, who just a few years before was in prison, is now living on Millionaire's Row in this incredible house with servants, with a lot of money in the bank. And she basically starts to spend Chadwick's fortune. Basically, she goes on these sprees where she's called the Duchess of Diamonds, because she goes into stores and just buys up all the diamonds, or she'll go buy 8 great grand pianos and then give them away, or she'll go traveling in Europe and make outrageous purchases. She redoes the house, and she invites all the other rich people in Millionaire's Row. But, you know, they aren't quite sure. She has a strange accent. She speaks broken English, and her eyes have the glint of the insane. But for Cassie believes that the more she spends, the more she'll be accepted. She buys 2 cars, 2 electric cars. She has all these servants, and she just keeps going and going and going. Chadwick suddenly realizes she's out of control. And he's a very sort of dour man, very reticent. And so what he does is he starts secretly taking money out of his accounts and putting it into Europe. And he leaves with his daughter to go to Europe with plans to never come back, leaving Cassie in the mansion. Now, whether or not Cassie cares about this, we really don't know, because she has already hatched her greatest scheme. So how does she do it? She goes to New York and she meets a lawyer named John Dillon. And John Dillon is one of these plugged in guys into the financial market. And she's met him through Dr. Chadwick. And she says, "Can you give me a ride to my father's house?" And John Dillon says, "Oh, well, certainly." And so he does. She gives him directions, and his mouth falls open when they stop in front of Andrew Carnegie's mansion. And Cassie says to him, "Could you just wait here? I just have to go and talk to my father." And Dillon is just dumbfounded. So she goes inside, and what she does is she talks to a maid and asks about a bogus reference. And the maid says, "Well, I've never heard of this person," but Cassie stalls and stalls and stalls. Then she returns, going back to the carriage where Dillon's, again, his mouth is just agape, and she drops an envelope, and out comes a trust agreement. And Dillon picks it up, staring at it, and he can't believe it. And it basically says she's going to inherit Carnegie's money. And she says, "Look, I have to tell you something, but you can tell nobody. Andrew Carnegie's my father. I'm his illegitimate daughter. He's been giving me money to keep me quiet, and now I'm going to inherit all the money." Now, Dillon is a plugged-in lawyer into the financial markets, and Cassie knows this. And he knows he will never keep his mouth shut. So he agrees and says, "Yes, I will," and then just tells everybody, which is her plan. Then she goes and sees a banker named Ira Reynolds. And she has with her a package. And in this package, she tells Ira Reynolds there's $5 million worth of notes. Now, Ira Reynolds knows her as Dr. Chadwick's wife and sees her as a very wealthy woman. And she says, will you sign a note saying this is worth 5 million and give it to me and keep these securities in your bank? Okay, so this is a fairly sophisticated understanding of banking. And Ira Reynolds looks at the package and he starts to say, well, I have to see what's in it. And she goes, would you doubt my word? Are you doubting my word? And Ira Reynolds says, no, I would never doubt your word. You know what? You're fine. And he signs a note worth $5 million without ever seeing what's in that package. And so then she goes on her way. So what she's doing is she's playing checkers. She's using one banker to go to another banker. So now she has Ira Reynolds in this note saying she has 5 million worth of securities in his bank. So then she goes to see a man named C.T. Beckworth. Now Beckworth runs a bank called the Oberlin Bank, which is a smaller bank. She goes in and says, I have to talk to you on a very urgent matter. And it's late, and there's a guy named Albert Spears with him. He's a teller. And she tells him an incredible tale saying, you know, I'm going to inherit all this money, and I need a place to put it. I want to put it in your bank. And you can't tell me about it, but I'm the illegitimate daughter of Andrew Carnegie, which just floors them. But again, she looks very wealthy. She seemed to have a lot of money. And then she shows him the note for 5 million from Ira Reynolds, which is the Wade Park Bank, which is a very respected bank. And Beckworth just nearly falls over in his chair, realizing this is true, that what she's telling him is absolutely true. So she basically says, look, I'm going to put all my money to your bank. And she shows him the trust agreement that John Dillon had seen. And she said, but I'm going to need loans in the short term because my father's not going to release the money for a while. Beckworth, who realizes he'll just be a zillionaire after all this money goes into his bank, says, of course, we can handle your needs. And so she leaves. Now she goes and sees a guy named Reverend Charles Eaton. And basically, Reverend Eaton runs a church for all the millionaires in Cleveland, including some of the Rockefellers. It's an amazing church. Everybody networks there and everything else. So Eaton is sort of this conduit to even more money. And she goes in and says, I have an incredible story to tell you, but I need your confidence. And again, she tells him, I need places to put this incredible amount of money I'm going to inherit. And you can't tell anybody, but you know, I'm the illegitimate daughter of Andrew Carnegie. And again, Eaton is just floored, but she shows him the note. She tells him about the Oberlin Bank, and it all sort of comes together. And Eaton realizes she's a woman in distress who needs to put her money somewhere, but she doesn't want anybody to know where it came from because this would bring great shame on her. And so Eaton says, no problem. I can plug you in. And at this point, she's triangulated her con to where she has 3 pillars of Cleveland society, three men who are plugged in. She has John Dillon in New York in the financial markets, and all this background information is going on. So now she can literally walk into any bank, they know who she is, and borrow whatever she wants. And that's what she does. She just starts to borrow money crazily. She borrows the equivalent of $60 million today. First thing she does is she goes and breaks the Oberlin Bank, because C.D. Beckworth not only gives her all the depositors money. This is a time when banks are not insured. We haven't had the Great Depression where it's FDIC insured. If a bank falls, you're out the money. Not only does Beckworth give her all the money from the bank, he also gives her his personal funds, like $200,000, and she just leaves him in the lurch. She pays back nothing, always promising to pay back, but not doing it. And she sets them up by doing some small loans and paying them back instantly. This is a time also when loans are given at exorbitant interest rates and with kickbacks, which was standard practice. In other words, if you borrowed $100,000, it was standard practice to give the banker 20 grand on a kickback or 30 grand on a kickback. And she gives immense kickbacks to Beckworth and these other bankers, so they give her even more money because they're personally profiting. But she's breaking the bank because she's got all the money out of the bank. So she's borrowing millions all on the Carnegie name. And nobody knows what she's doing as she goes from one bank to another, because these banks, this isn't the internet, they don't cross-reference. So she's just basically going and cleaning out one bank after another. She gets to a point where she gets a promissory note for $500,000. She gets a bank in New York to give her. And again, this is all founded on air, because she has no money at all. She just has debt. She has debt upon debt upon debt. She has so much debt, she has no idea how much debt she has. So then she goes to Eaton and says, look, I need Reverend Eaton. I need some more money. I know I told you I want a place to put money, but I actually need a loan. Can you help me out? He sees her as this woman in distress who has this shameful secret, and he connects her with a man named Newton in New York, who is actually his brother-in-law. And the Newton loan is for $200,000 and $190,000. And Newton immediately starts to smell a rat, because he requires some money back. She says, oh, I can't pay you now. I'll get some money soon. And he doesn't do what Beckworth and the others do, where they sort of sit back and wait and hope that Carnegie is going to pay them off. He sues her. And once he initiates suit, the whole house of cards starts to fall apart. He hires a detective. He uncovers all these loans, and they realize that this is the biggest Ponzi scheme at a time when Ponzi is just coming on the scene, that they've ever seen. This woman is millions of dollars in debt, and Newton is the top of the iceberg. And the whole thing blows up. The authorities find out about it, and a warrant is issued for her arrest. She flees to New York. They catch up with her in a hotel, and actually that's where my book opens up, is they're actually chasing her from one hotel to another, trying to arrest her. They finally do arrest her in New York, and they put her in the Tombs, which is a famous jail in New York, for a while, and then she's brought back to Cleveland for the trial of the century. And in the book, I actually cut between the trial and what I've told you is the backstory as we go forward. This is incredible. This is just covered by every newspaper, front page news every day. And what's more incredible is Andrew Carnegie gets subpoenaed and called in. And the big moment is when he comes into the courtroom and they face off. And Carnegie is more curious because, he just laughed when they said, she's claimed to be his daughter. And he said, that's ridiculous. And that he hadn't signed a note in 30 years and all this stuff. But he wants to see this person who is capable of borrowing millions in his name. And so when he comes in, they basically, he testifies, but he and Cassie lock eyes, and every newspaper, is on it, writing it up and everything. He realizes, in his quest to find out how he got all his money, as he sees the ruthless eyes in front of him, Cassie Chadwick, and he realizes, like, she is him. She is him. And again, thousands of articles cover the trial, and little books come out about her and sold for like $0.25. Everybody wants in on it. Everyone wants to make money. And what the prosecution ignores basically all the loans, and they center on the Oberlin Bank, because this is the reason she's getting prosecuted, because all those people in the Oberlin Bank are out of money when it crashes. And they bring it down to a simple conspiracy charge of a federal bank, that she was pulling money out when there was no money there. And she was in a conspiracy with Beckworth and Spears. Beckworth dies. Basically, he is just so devastated, and he just dies, and they call him, he died from shame. So that leaves Spears and her holding the bag, and the trial drags on and on and on, but in the end, she's convicted for 10 years and sentenced to 10 years in jail. They appeal it. Spears goes to jail too, even though he did nothing. But again, because people lost money in this scheme, innocent people, somebody has to pay for it. And and again, it's really what they got her for was passing bad checks. It wasn't for all those loans. It was for the passing of bad checks. So she's sent off to jail. She immediately becomes ill. She can't see. She has convulsions, and within 2 years, she dies. Very quickly. Andrew Carnegie goes on to be a philanthropist, trying to give away all his money that he's accumulated. He never can get to the end. Cassie Chadwick goes down in legend as the biggest con woman ever in the United States. And to this day, people are still not sure how she got these sophisticated bankers, the 1% of the 1%, to give her all this money without signing loan documents. And by the way, the package that Reynolds signed for $5 million when they opened it, it was full of paper. It had nothing in it. Yet he had signed a note saying this package was worth $5 million, and that's what she used on other banks to get money. So she had a very, very sophisticated understanding of how people lent during the Gilded Age, which was really based on greed, because again, everybody got a kickback, and they charged her 30% on these exorbitant amounts, thinking that this woman didn't know what she was doing. But in fact, she knew very well what she was doing. And that is the brilliant con of Cassie Chadwick. I think I'll read you the very last part of the book that sort of sums it up. Painting Cassie as a criminal is one way to look at it, but she did not exist in a vacuum. She was a product of her time, and that time was one that rewarded someone who was smart, inventive, aggressive, and able to break through class boundaries of education and gender to beat the men of the 1% at their own game. Andrew Carnegie knew her game and had to appear at a trial. He commented on how gullible the bankers had been to lend her money. But the old Scotsman understood ruthless intent. And he must have recognized that in the woman sitting across the courtroom. In the end, Cassie Chadwick reached up very far and ended up with millions. The truth is, Elizabeth Bigley came to the poker table with nothing. No chips, no backing, no heritage, an immigrant who left with the other players' wallets. That is a sign of either a brilliant woman or at least a brilliant con. So with that, I can take any questions you may have. Get back, honey, here.
Yeah, if you would put them in chat, that would be great. We can go ahead and try to answer anything. It's a pretty fascinating story. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. I knew it was just paper in that package. I knew it was like Kleenex or something. I figured it was like in this thing where he gives them a package of Kleenex and sticks them.
Yeah, and I go, in the presentation, I'm skimming the rooftops on this. I go into it in depth in the book. There's a lot of things in there that I can't cover, but I also there's a lot of things going on in the United States that play into this, and it really sets her up as being part of this massive change in money and in the way people live. And Beckworth, I really go into his background and how he was a staid 19th century banker who was respected all over the town, and how she destroyed him basically, and he was a victim too. He saw greed, he saw the ability to have more money in his bank than ever. And yeah. So
I have a couple of questions. Wait, let me just scooch back for 1 second here.
Sure.
If I can. Hold on 1 second. Let me get that. Okay. The question was, are the history books interesting? They are. They're fascinating. But the other question is, how do you keep your notes and thoughts in order as you do your extensive research?
Oh, good question. Basically, I research first, And, research has changed a lot because of the internet, where it's, you used to have to go travel around and get sources. Now everything's been digitized. So you really can get just about anything you need. Everything that's been Smithsonian's been digitized. Newspaper.com is an amazing resource. It's millions of newspapers, all digitized. And so with Cassie Chadwick, I could just get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles. And that's how I put this together. I mean, I had to because there was no other books on it. Usually you can find a few books and use those too. There was nothing. There was a book in the 70s. This guy wrote this sort of fictional account. It was awful. And, but, so then you take all that and then you're ready to sort of, it's called narrative nonfiction, because what you're doing is you're going to create. I wrote 10 novels before I started writing narrative nonfiction. So then you're going to create your story, which is based in fact. So all my books are footnoted, and you're going to tell a story. You're going to sort of tell that story in a way that people can relate to it.
What happened to her children?
Her son, he actually became a salesman, and then he just disappeared from history. What's interesting about this time period is people could change their names because there's no Social Security numbers. That didn't come till the New Deal in the 30s. So you could change your name and that would be it. You would just be somebody else. And so people would just sort of fall off the radar. And, very quickly, he just disappeared. There's just no information on him at all. His name was Emil, and he's in the book quite a bit because he is with her when she gets arrested. And there's a great scene in the book where she gets arrested in a very posh hotel. And this is 1905. And so the sheriff or this treasury agent comes in and he's like, "Madam, I have an unpleasant duty." And she's, laying in her bed. She's like, I'm prostrated. I can't do anything. And he says, then it will be my duty to wait outside for you. And when you're ready, then we can go down and discuss what we have to do next. I mean, it's all very polite and everything. And Emil's with her by her bedside, and her maid's with her. Her maid goes with her to prison along with Emil, and her doctor comes, and just, it's this crazy moment between the 19th century and the 20th century. So even dealing with a woman who's being accused of stealing millions of dollars was novel. Nobody, first of all, people didn't think women were that smart. They didn't think they had that kind of brain. And in fact, the bankers all swore she was working with somebody else, that she could have never come up with this on her own, that some other man had figured out this whole scheme, like Mr. Newton, who got took for 200,000, swore that she had other people who, were behind this. But the truth is, she was brilliant. She understood what, buttons to press. She understood, and that one trust document I showed you, she wrote reams of these, and they were very, very complicated financial documents that, bankers read and said, "Oh, well, this is valid," and then they would lend her money. So again, they didn't think women were capable of doing something like this.
Of course. How old was she when she died?
Let's see. Here, hang on one second here. It's a good question. She wasn't very old. 1859 to 1907, 48. Right? Is that right? Yeah, 48.
Yeah.
That's it.
Huh. And how old was her son when she went to prison?
Oh, so she went, I think she went in 1890. He was pretty young. Probably, less than 10 years old at that point.
And he wasn't very old. Staying with her sister, or probably?
Yes, he did. And in fact, one reason, because nobody understood why she didn't really fight back on the charges. And there was speculation that she would have to reveal her background, that she would, her family, and also prior crimes. defense, which they had no idea about. So, it's almost unbelievable that she got railroaded for those 9.5 years. She only served 2 to 3, but she, in the proceedings, she did not fight back. And nobody could figure out where the money was coming for her defense. So
That's interesting. Nobody never figured.
She's a con woman. So, when I was putting it together, it's a con story. It's like, it's what appears, it's that suspension of disbelief.
What happened to the father of her son? Did you say he died? I don't remember.
Oh, that was Mr. Hoover. Yeah, he died.
That was the farmer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Someone's suggesting you do books on art history.
Well, never say never.
Exactly. Anything else, people?
Yeah, it looks like you got 19 in the chat.
Yeah. I think we've covered most of those.
Yeah, and you can go to my website. This book has been thankfully very, very highly reviewed even before it's come out. So all the reviews are on there. Publishers Weekly also did a feature that's there too. I will be doing media for this, so I'll get that on the site too. And then of course all the other books. And then under events, there's 35, 38 scheduled. So you can just go to events and see where I'm speaking.
So thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. And this was really, really fascinating. Thank you.